Find your snowblower doesn't pull over real easy. Kind of start to pull and it just binds up on you. Ooh. But if you pull it slow and gently, it'll roll over like nothing. I'll dig into it and show you what the problem is. The other thing that can happen along with your not being able to pull it over with the pull rope is your electric starter will roll it over. It might just make a buzzing noise. Oh, but every once in a while it'll turn over like nothing. Just like that. But if you get to a certain spot, it just won't go. Should just buzz like this once in a while if it's in the right spot. See, won't turn over. But hit it again, and one more time. Spins right over. What could be the problem? Let's dig into it. So these engines have what's called a mechanical compression release inside. So to diagnose this problem, first you want to make sure there's no physical things blocking the engine from turning over, but where you can pull it over freely, there's no weird noises until it gets to that one point and then it spins by it. It's usually something to do with the valves. So if you pull off your valve cover, check your valves, make sure everything looks okay. If you don't know what you're looking at, well, it's hard to tell, but you can spin it over and take out the spark plug. It'll spin over easy usually. So if you spin it over and watch your valves, see, I gotta pull out the spark plug. All right, so if you pull out your spark plug, no spark plug, you should be able to spin the motor over nice and easy. Let's see what happens here. Oh yeah, like nothing. So that tells you there's probably nothing physically stopping the engine from spinning over. So what you want to do is look at your valves when you pull it over slowly and see, are they moving completely? Sorry for this shitty camera work. Okay, that's the exhaust valve. Yep, that one's working. There goes the intake. That's working. So this is the easiest way to turn over the engine on the bench, is to use a socket and a ratchet with a bolt in the crankshaft. So your valve on the left is the exhaust, the valve on the right is the intake. And when you spin the engine over, you should see both valves move. If both valves are not moving, you have a problem with a push rod or a valve itself, valve guide, something like that. It could be a rocker arms broken, bent, whatever. But you should see the exhaust valve go. And try and hold my camera still here. Too close. Hold on a sec. Yeah. All right. Try this again. So turn it over slowly. You'll get intake, so the piston should be moving down, sucking in the air fuel mixture. And then when it starts to come back up, the piston will start to come back up and compress that air fuel mixture. And then when it gets to the top, roughly, I don't know if we can see in there with a light. A light right here. Piston comes up. So what you should see when the engine is turned over is you should see the piston in there moving up and down. Okay, it's going down, up. All right, so when the piston's moving down on one of the valves, the intake valve here, when you see the intake valve moving down, opening, where is it? Come on. Okay, the intake valve's opening. The piston should be going down. All right, so make sure you're turning over the engine the same way as the starter rope does. So you should see your valves move. One on the... So when you turn over the engine with the ratchet or the wrench, whatever you use, you should see the piston moving up and down inside the spark plug hole. There we go. Up, down, up, down, up, down. All right. So if you watch the valves, when the intake valve, this one on the right here, that's the exhaust going open now. Okay, when the intake valve is opening, the piston should be moving down from the top. Okay, then as it goes down, it's sucking in that air fuel mix from the carburetor. And then as the intake valve closes, the piston should start moving up towards the top to compress the air fuel mix. Once it gets near the top, just before, usually the spark plug should fire it, creating an explosion in the cylinder, and if all the timing is correct, it'll have peak pressure just up near the top there, and it should drive the piston down. And then once the piston gets all the way down near the bottom, the exhaust valve should start to open. When the exhaust valve opens, the piston should start coming back up. Start chasing that exhaust valve, pushing the exhaust spent charge out the exhaust, the muffler. Then the cycle starts all over again. Piston starts going down, so you get intake stroke, piston's going down, intake valve open. Then you get your compression stroke, the piston moving up, compressing that charge, both valves are closed. And once it fires, that's called the power stroke. Piston's going down, being driven by the explosion. Then you have the exhaust stroke, piston starts moving up, exhaust valve's open, letting that spent charge out of there. Then it starts all over again. Now the reason why this engine was hard to pull over is these little engines have what's called a mechanical compression release. What it does is it blips open one of the valves a little bit when the piston gets near the top on compression stroke to bleed off some of that compression to make it easier to start the engine for you. Now, if that compression release is not working, the engine will be hard to pull over, or the electric start might have a hard time turning it over. So what you should see on the valves is the intake should open like normal. Then when the piston gets up near the top, the exhaust valve should have a little blip to bleed off that compression, but it doesn't on this engine. So that leads me to believe that the mechanical compression release is broken or stuck or something. So we're gonna pull this engine apart and get to that mechanical compression release, which is on the crankshaft on these engines, and that is right here. So if you look at the camshaft, this is your intake profile here on this side. This is your exhaust profile. So as this thing's turning, opens the intake valve. Yeah. Okay, then on this side, your exhaust valve. See that little piece right there? The tappet, which pushes up the push rod, which pushes the rocker around, which opens the valve, hits that little bump and blips the valve open on your compression stroke. So that's at slow RPMs. When the RPMs increase enough, this little flyweight moves out and it pulls that little compression release out of the way so the engine can run like normal at higher RPMs. Just to make it easier to start is all that little thing does. And if you look how fragile they are, it doesn't take much for something to get wedged in behind there and stop it from moving. Or if his spring breaks, all kinds of little things could happen. Or even this could break right off. To get to that camshaft, we have to take this cover off. You'll want to clean off that rust, any rust on the outside of the crankshaft there. Take out the dipstick, take off these bolts, and you're going to want something under the engine because whatever oil you couldn't drain out of there is going to leak all over the place. I usually tip them back so all the stuff stays inside. I'll pull this off and get right back. Before you take off this end cover, you want to make sure the valves aren't putting any pressure on the camshaft. So I just turn the engine until both valves are closed, not open. Make sure both valves have no pressure on them. Then I pull off the end cover. Alright, so once you get all the bolts out, the dipstick out, after you've cleaned off the rust on the crankshaft where the seal is there, you just want to see if you can pull that cover off. Usually they're stuck on a little bit, so I use a little rubber hammer and kind of tap a little bit on each side to break it free gently. Oh, see that? Popped right open. To the other side. Now it'll probably come right off there. Let's see. Put the bolt out. Oh yeah, look at all the oil coming out of my bench. There. Alright, this is what we're dealing with. Ooh, this is gross inside. You'll have to clean off all the gasket material. You want to clean out the inside of the engine, anything in there, look for any chunks of metal or anything. Same with the end cap here. Check out your governor. You don't want that coming apart on you. Make sure that's all good. Bearings and stuff. Quite a bit of sludge in the bottom of this motor. Hopefully she's not too damaged. Now make sure there's no pressure on any of this stuff. Yeah, she's all loose. Okay, sometimes the parts will fall out when you pull off that end cover, so you gotta be careful of that too. But see, let's line up the timing marks. There. So you got timing marks for the cam, and there's probably a mark somewhere on the balance shaft here, but I don't see it, and I didn't take it apart, so I'm not going to mess with that. So pull out your camshaft, and these pieces are going to probably fall in. Nope, they stayed. All right, so what do we got? We have a stuck compression release. Oh yeah, really stuck. Last time I had one of these apart, it was chunks of the valve seals had deteriorated and got stuck behind the compression release. We might be able to just clean this up and reuse it and clean out the motor so it doesn't happen. It looks bent. It's like the pins are coming out of it. I think we're gonna put a new cam in this anyway, because that does not look very good. It looks bent. Alright, so we got it all cleaned up pretty good. Got the tappets are still in there. Gonna put a little oil in where the cam goes. Put a little oil on the cam. Gotta keep it lubricated. Don't need it to seize up on us. Alright, now we're gonna line up the timing mark. Okay. Now we gotta install it, line up the timing marks. Let's see. Alright, timing marks lined up. Dot to dot. Put a little oil on that side. Squirt some oil down in on the camshaft lobes there. Somewhere. Let me turn on the light. There we go. Yeah, can't have too much oil. Put a little oil on the crankshaft, on the balance gear. Got the cover all cleaned up pretty good. I'm gonna lubricate the spots there. The cam, balance gear, a little bit for the crank. Put some on the governor. Oops, got some on the gasket there. Now the gasket kit was supposed to come with a new seal, but it didn't. So we're gonna risk running that old one. It looks alright in there. The spring didn't come off or anything. One good thing is if it does decide to leak, we can change the seal after, but gotta figure out how to get a seal. Alright, I'm gonna put this cover back on. The important part is that you don't force it on, and you gotta make sure you don't hit the seal on this very sharp edge of the crankshaft keyway, or else you cut up the seal. Alright, let's see if we can do this. Alright. Like I said, gotta be gentle, don't force it, because you're gonna have all the gears and all the shafts and everything line up. Sometimes it takes a little finesse, and then once the seal hits the wide part of the crank, you'll have some trouble. Ideally, you'd have a seal installer, but there's enough of a chamfer on the edge there, it'll go if I work it gently. Alright, looks like the seal went on. Now we get the gears and shafts all lined up, and the gasket hopefully stays in place. Sometimes you gotta give it a little wiggle and spin while you do it. You know, just kind of work it, push on the... I'm gonna stop recording and put the phone down so I can work that on there gently. So get it all set on there, and the gasket looks okay. And all the holes are lined up. Again, you gotta be real gentle putting that on. Don't force it. Don't use the bolts to pull it in. Get it all on there by hand. I usually squeeze like this on both sides. Make sure the crank still rotates freely so you didn't bind something up. All right, we're good to start putting bolts, and I'm gonna put blue Loctite on them because it had some on them when I took it apart. And I'll look up the torque spec and I'll torque it to the factory specs, and we can reassemble the machine. Once you get all the bolts started, I usually take and snug up the two that are directly across from each other and make sure everything still spins. I don't put them real tight. I don't want to break anything if something's misaligned in there. So just until they kind of contact and squeeze, and we'll check. All right, so I got, whoops, I lost my socket. There it is. I got these two bolts snugged, and let's make sure the engine still turns freely. Okay, no problem there. It's doing quite nicely. All right, I'm gonna go around and torque the bolts to spec and in sequence, and I'll be back. All right, got her all bolted, torqued down, back together. Engine turns nice and free. All right, we gotta put the push rods back in the same way they came out. So the top has to go where the top was, the bottom has to go where the bottom was, right and left have to be the same. So I'm gonna clean them up, put oil on the ends of them, and put them back in there. When you put them back in there, you're gonna make sure they're right in the cup on the tap. It's hard to see. The light's not working for me here. Let's see. There. Oh, anyway, you're gonna make sure they're in the little cup that's down in there, the top of the tappet. Make sure they're lined up. These are. And then once you get that, you're gonna put the rocker arms on. So with one hand, I probably won't be able to do this to compress the spring, so I have to put the camera down again. All right, once you get them all back in there, don't forget to oil up all the mating contacting surfaces. Otherwise, if it's dry, you will hear probably a squealing sound until it gets oil, which is a bad thing. How do I know this? I've had people do it before, and they're like, "What's that noise?" Well, you didn't oil it, man. All right, then now we have to set the valve clearance because it's a new camshaft, so the grind could be a little taller, a little shorter, so we need to check the valve clearance, set that to specification. I can do another video on valve clearance. All right, so if you want to set the valve clearance, you want to spin the motor over a few times, make sure everything's moving, make sure it's all seated where it belongs before you go set the valve clearance. All right, so to set the valve clearance, you need the engine at top dead center on compression stroke. So what you're gonna do is watch your valves. So, or rocker arms, either way, whatever you want to call it. So turn the engine the same way as the pull rope does. So that's exhaust. Then we got intake. Now the piston's going to start coming up for compression. So I use a little wooden dowel or plastic dowel to put down in the spark plug hole and hold on to it. And when I turn and the piston, oh, don't drop it in there though. Whew, almost did it. When the piston starts to come up, it will push the dowel out. So when the piston comes up, see the little plastic rods coming out. When you put your finger on it, you'll be able to feel it's a lot easier. When it comes out all the way, then you just go by a little tiny bit, then you can set the valve clearance. I have the engine where it needs to be now. On this particular engine, the crankshaft keyway, when that piston was at the top center, lined up almost exactly with the where the piston would be, if you will, where the piston would be. So both rocker arms are loose, so that means more than likely we're at the right spot. So you just check the clearance with a feeler gauge. This particular engine called for 5 to 7 thousandths on the intake and 7 to 9 on the exhaust. I will set that with these feeler gauges, and then I'll spin it over a few times and make sure everything's good, and then I'll show you how the compression release actually should be working. So on this intake, it was supposed to be 5 to 7 thousandths, so I took my feeler gauges, and the 6 thousandths one fits in pretty good. Let's go up to 8, because if an 8 fits, then it's definitely too wide. If an 8 doesn't fit, then we're probably good. So let's go with the 8. Sometimes you gotta wiggle the rocker arm a little bit to make it go down in there, because it'll get twisted a little bit. Doesn't seem to want to go, but I'm gonna take and put the phone down so I can check it with 2 hands and wiggle the rocker arm with 1 hand and use the feeler gauge with the other. So on the intake, the 6 thousandths went in, the 8 would not, and the 7 would not. So we should be good to go. Once I set the exhaust to the specified 7 and 9, I'll spin it over a few times and check it again. And double check the tension on the nuts if I don't have to adjust anything. Those lock nuts have to be tight so it doesn't move while it's running. So this particular engine, I did not have to readjust the valves. They were both right around 7, so that's good. I'm double checking the lock nuts here, 13 on the bottom. You hold that one and then you snug the lock nut, jam nut with a 10mm. Same on the exhaust side. Spin it over a few times, recheck your valve clearance, and then if it's all set, you're good to put the valve cover back on. But I'm going to show you how the compression release should look when it's operating properly in a second here. All right, so the valves are all adjusted, all set. So when you spin this motor over, this is what you should see normally, and it's similar on a lot of motors, this whole process. So as you're going around, exhaust, intake, and then once that intake valve closes and you start coming up on compression, you should see the exhaust valve do a little flick, and that's bleeding off that compression. See it? Boop, just like that. That's all it takes to make it easier to pull over. So once I put the spark plug in, this thing will pull over pretty easy compared to what it was. Exhaust, intake, and then whoop, there it goes. See how easy it pulls over now. It's all back together with the correct stuff. Oh, look at that. That's the way you need it to be. And if you go real slow, it'll still come up. You can feel the compression. Okay, right there, that's real slow. And then you just give it a gentle tug with 1 finger. Okay, maybe 2 fingers. Yeah. Real slow till you hit compression. A lot easier than it was before. All right, now we're just gonna oil it back up and put it back on the machine, and off we go. This is an Ariens AX369. Most of your newer engines are really similar. Not many differences. Thanks for watching.